Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Wednesday, June 6th, and today is day 244. According to the Washington Post, there have been escalations between Hezbollah and the Israeli military, and those escalations are coming to a head and have been in recent days on the northern border of Israel and the southern border of Lebanon. Top officials have said that Israel will soon decide whether or not to go on the offensive in terms of a broader war with Hezbollah, adding to fears that fighting could expand beyond just Gaza. Today, Wednesday, Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel said we're prepared for very intense action in the north. He was visiting a military base there. The Israeli leader vowed to restore security, quote, one way or another. After the military's chief of staff, Herzl Halevi, said we're approaching a decision point. He said the army was ready and had gone through training to move to an offensive in regard to the Israeli escalations with Hezbollah. I have noticed several red alerts on my phone. That's when in Israel there's alerts that there has been a breach or some type of an attack, an incoming alarm related. Most of the alarms have been related to the northern border, signaling an attack or an escalation between Hezbollah and the IDF. Those have continued over the past several days. Also, in relationship to Lebanon, in Beirut, a gunman opened fire at the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon earlier today. The gunman was shot and wounded by Lebanese troops there. The country's army said in a statement, the gunman was identified as a Syrian national. The U.S. National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, told the news that one Lebanese soldier was wounded and that the United States is working closely with local authorities to ensure that there's no further threat. Also related to the Lebanese border, 11 people were wounded, one critically when a Hezbollah drone hit a northern Israeli town called Herfesh. And the IDF said that their Air Force struck Hezbollah targets last night and earlier this morning in South Lebanon. Human Rights Watch has accused Israel of using white phosphorus on residential buildings in at least 5 towns in southern Lebanon. When I was in Beirut in January, we had heard reports of white phosphorus as well, which not only completely destroys the crops immediately, but it also ruins the ground for further usage. That's a violation of international law if white phosphorus is being used. The Human Rights Watch report said there's no evidence of burn injuries due to white phosphorus in Lebanon, but researchers have heard accounts indicating respiratory damage. In terms of the ceasefire hostage deal between Hamas and Israel, there's no significant news in that regard. Hamas has said they're dealing seriously and positively with the agreement that would allow for the potential total halt of the war, complete Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, and a hostage Palestinian prisoner swap. That's according to Ismail Hanania. He said that in a statement. According to Reuters, Jake Sullivan said, we're still waiting for the formal response from Hamas via Qatari mediators. The CIA director, Bill Burns, is going to be in Doha to consult with Qatari mediators about that deal. The defense minister in Israel, Gallant, said that all negotiations with Hamas will be conducted under fire. In other words, Israel is not going to halt their attacks on Gaza in the meantime. Far-right National Security Minister Ben Gvir, his party said that they are not, they won't commit to voting with the government in the Knesset until Prime Minister Netanyahu stops hiding the draft agreement with Hamas from the minister. So there's just a lot of back and forth happening within Israeli politics right now. Also related to Gaza, the Famine Early Warning Systems Network has said it's possible famine is underway in northern Gaza. You will recall that USAID and Samantha Power have already said that their opinion is that famine has already begun in North Gaza, and that part of the problem is humanitarian access has been so impeded that experts can't get into northern Gaza to even be able to evaluate the conditions there. So an independent group of experts has not been able to have access or data collection to be able to prove whether or not famine has begun in northern Gaza. The death toll in Gaza is 36,586 Palestinians and at least 83,074 people wounded since October 7th. Haaretz journalist Nir Hassan was attacked by far-right Jewish youth. This, if you have seen pictures of this on social media today or the last 24 hours, was Jerusalem's flag parade. And so far-right Jewish youth attacked Haaretz journalist Nir Hassan in Jerusalem. Several assailants knocked him to the ground, kicked him before border police officers intervened. hours before the parade officially launched, hundreds of youth and young men streamed through the old city of Jerusalem and the Muslim quarter, chanting "Death to Arabs," violently attacking Palestinians, journalists, and peace activists. Some also vandalized Palestinian shops. The Israeli government is set to vote authorizing the Israeli Defense Forces to raise the number of reservists in active duty to 350,000 by the end of August. And the IDF is also talking about establishing a specific reservist unit that would respond directly to acts of terrorism on the Gaza border that would allow for a quick and available response. You might have heard that on October 7th, there were some reports that it took up to 8 hours for the IDF to get to some of the locations where Israelis were waiting for military support on that day. What else is in the news? The IDF has said that it will start presenting findings of the probe about what happened on October 7th and why there were so many delays that day. The first issues will be presented in terms of what happened at the kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th. And so that is supposed to be made available soon. And in an interview with Israel's public broadcaster, far-right Finance Minister Smotrich, who is also a minister in the Defense Ministry, said that the Hamas attack on October 7th had nothing to do with me. It was an intelligence and an operational failure. Also, a 19-year-old Arab Israeli, so a Palestinian citizen of Israel from the town of Abu Ghosh, was arrested on the suspicion of impersonating an Israeli soldier and claiming that Israel engages in systematic and deliberate killing of innocent women, children, and babies every day in Gaza. He conducted an interview in English, and according to Israeli police, it had a significant amount of views and exposure. And a Tel Aviv district court shortened the duration of the government's order to shut down Al Jazeera's broadcasting in Israel. That order apparently was just a temporary order, and it's set to expire this Sunday. In the broader Middle East, Iran has said that Israel is going to pay the price. They had a military advisor who was killed on Sunday in Aleppo. An Iranian military advisor was killed in an attack that was believed to have been an Israeli attack, and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard chief warned that Israel would pay the price for that death. And there have been talks between Hamas and Fatah, the two political parties of the Palestinian Authority, President Mahmoud Abbas. Those talks are supposed to be in China in mid-June, according to Reuters. Just a couple of updates in terms of the United States. President Biden has been getting some criticisms for comments that he made in response to Prime Minister Netanyahu. He's come under fire for saying that he was uncertain whether or not Israel was committing war crimes in Gaza. He told Time magazine in an interview yesterday that a lot of innocent people have been killed and that Israel is being investigated for alleged war crimes. He also cast doubt on Netanyahu's intentions in the war, saying that there was every reason for people to draw the conclusion that Netanyahu has been prolonging the war for his own political purposes. But then later last night, President Biden backtracked on those remarks, and reporters asked him whether or not Netanyahu was playing politics with the war. So he's been backtracking in that regard. The bottom line is there's little evidence that President Biden is shifting in any way in terms of his Israel policy. And in fact, Israel just signed an agreement yesterday, Tuesday, with the United States to add a third squadron of F-35 warplanes to the Israeli Air Force. That delivery will not begin until 2028, but the timing of the agreement is notable since President Biden is putting pressure on Israel to wind down its war in Gaza. And so while he's putting pressure on them to wind down the war, they're signing an agreement for more warplanes. House Speaker Michael Johnson is negotiating with Prime Minister Netanyahu to set the date for when Netanyahu will speak before the joint session of Congress in Washington, D.C. So those of us in D.C. have that to look forward to. And in the United States, the New York Times just came out with a report that Israel spent $2 million on a social media campaign targeting U.S. lawmakers, particularly African-American and other members of Congress and the U.S. public, to encourage their support of U.S. weapons sales to Israel. The covert campaign was commissioned by Israel's Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, a government body that connects Jews around the world with the state of Israel. This is according to 4 Israeli officials. The ministry allocated $2 million, and the campaign began in October. It was primarily on the platform X, but other social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram, to post pro-Israel comments, to particularly encourage Black leaders, Democrats such as Representative Hakeem Jeffries and others to continue funding Israel's military. According to CNN, yesterday on Capitol Hill, the House voted to pass a bill to sanction the International Criminal Court officials. The House Republicans responded to the court's seeking arrest warrants for Netanyahu and others. The ICC's targeting of Netanyahu sparked widespread backlash from both Republicans and Democrats in Congress. President Biden also denounced the ICC's move, saying there's no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. But the administration said it does not support the GOP-led effort to sanction the court. Even though that was passed in the House, it is unlikely that the Senate will take up the sanctions bill. The House passed the bill 247 to 155. In a vote, 42 Democrats joined the Republicans in support. So our final just encouragement is that the scriptures remind us continually that God hears the cry of the oppressed. He does not forget the orphans and the widows. So might we hold on to that truth for the people of Gaza. And as days continue to pass, as water is in short supply and as bombs continue to fall, might we be motivated and compelled to continue to raise our voices as 244 days of atrocities have continued. We will not give up in calling for an end to all violence and in working towards peace, that peace might come quickly. So don't give up in our efforts.